Chapter 1. The House at the End of the Valley. The air in Yorkshire at the end of October always carries a damp, cold scent. The morning mist drifts through old wooden cracks and dark-colored tree branches, as if nature itself senses something is about to happen. The wild grass in front of Whitmore Hall lies in eerie silence, as though even nature is holding its breath. Whitmore Hall is a very old mansion, over 150 years old, sitting at the end of a long dirt road. Its iron gate is rusted, creaking as it opens. The wooden fence surrounding it has collapsed in several places. This was the home of the Elmridge family, wealthy, well-known, and often surrounded by strange rumors. On the morning of October 27th, police in North Yorkshire received a phone call. The caller's voice trembled. They're all dead." Police arrived within 20 minutes. What they saw inside left everyone stunned. 7 people, 7 bodies, scattered across the grand living room. No signs of struggle, no screams, no broken glass, no blood. Only silence and a faint scent like expensive perfume. All the clocks in the house had stopped at exactly 2:06 a.m. On the tea table were 7 white teacups, some still warm. The piano was left open, a half-played song paused on a low note. The family portrait on the wall was slightly tilted, a detail only the observant would notice, but something felt wrong. The chief inspector said, "We need to call Central. This case is too much." 3 hours later, a handwritten letter was sent. No emails, no phone calls, just black ink on plain paper, reading, "To Thomas Wexley, we need you." Thomas Wexley, age 62, was once a famous detective. He had solved many of England's toughest cases. But 5 years ago, he retired and moved to a wooden cabin on the outskirts of London. There, he raised pigeons, listened to classical music, and preferred writing letters by hand. When the letter arrived, he was on his balcony, sipping red wine, legs resting on a chair, Debussy playing in the background. He showed no emotion as he read the message. But a few minutes later, he stood up, called his largest pigeon, tied a note to its leg, and let it fly. The note simply said, "I'm coming." The Whitmore Hall case would be the final investigation of his life. He didn't know that yet, but something deep within told him. It was that scent again, a scent he hadn't smelled in over 30 years. The scent of an old guilt, the scent of a darkness yet unnamed. Chapter 2. The Detective Returns. Thomas Wexley was not a normal detective. He lived alone in a small wooden house near a forest outside London. He didn't have a mobile phone, or a computer, or even a TV. He wrote everything on an old typewriter and sent letters using pigeons, more than 30 of them. One morning, a black pigeon landed on his window. It carried a letter. The paper was old, the ink was black. There was no envelope, only one short sentence. "To Thomas Wexley, we need you." Wexley read the letter and burned it right away. But that night he couldn't sleep. He listened to classical music and looked at an old map on his wall. Something inside him said, "This is not just another case." The next morning, he tied a small note to another pigeon. It said, "I'm coming. No one is allowed to interrupt my work."
The house looked like it was frozen in time. Everything was clean, too clean. Wexley walked into the living room and stopped. He looked at the police chief and said, "Everyone must leave the house, now." The police left. Wexley was alone. He walked slowly around the room. Then he bent down and smelled the air. There was a soft smell, like perfume. He closed his eyes. He knew the smell. La Nuit Blanche, a French perfume, very expensive. It was stopped in 2011. Only one man Wexley had met used it, Darius Vale, a killer who poisoned people with tea. He died 12 years ago. This room felt the same.
Wexley opened his small bag. He took out some white powder and put it on the tea table. After a few seconds, he saw a handprint. The hand was small, like a woman's, but there were no fingerprints. In the fireplace, the ashes were still warm. Wexley used tweezers to take out a burned paper. Only a few words were left. The warning was already given. He looked around the room. Then he walked to the family photo on the wall. It was a little tilted, 7 degrees to the side. He looked closer. One face in the picture was different. The eyes were looking at the piano. Wexley walked out of the house and whispered to himself, "This is not just murder. This is a message. A past that is not dead yet." Chapter 3. The Tilted Portraits. Wexley returned to Whitmore Hall on a foggy morning. The house was too quiet, like it was holding its breath. He walked slowly through the large living room and looked carefully at the walls. There were 7 family portraits, each one showing a member of the Elmridge family, and all of them were hanging slightly tilted. Wexley took a small compass from his coat. He stood in front of each painting, checking the angle. All 7 were tilted exactly 7 degrees to the west. "This is not a mistake," he whispered. "It's a message." Wexley went to the local police station and made a strange request. He wanted to open the grave of George Elmridge, the father of the family who had died 10 years ago. At first, the police refused, but after some paperwork and strong words from Wexley, they agreed. That afternoon, they opened the coffin. Everyone stood still. The coffin was empty. No body, nothing. Only a small half-burnt piece of paper hidden in the corner. One line of text could still be read. "I warned you all." Wexley asked to check the cellar of Whitmore Hall, a room that had been locked for years. In the dusty basement, he found an old painting stand and one empty picture frame turned to face the wall. On the back of the frame, someone had carved faded words, "The 8th has returned." Suddenly, the light above flickered. A cold wind passed through the room. From far away, Wexley heard soft footsteps, but no one else was there. He looked up at the ceiling, eyes sharp. Someone changed the past, and now the past is coming back. Chapter 4. The 8th Survivor. Her name was Eliza Holloway, a soft-spoken young woman in her early 20s. She had once worked as a maid at Whitmore Hall and vanished without a trace 6 months before the murders. And now, just as mysteriously, she reappeared. She walked into the North Yorkshire station with dirt-stained shoes, trembling hands, and wide, glassy eyes. Her first words, "They're all dead. I saw it happen." In a small interrogation room, Wexley listened silently as Eliza spoke. "Every October, they held a gathering, just the family, no staff allowed. They wore black, candles everywhere, Latin words on the walls. I heard singing, low, strange melodies that didn't sound human." She paused. "They called it the renewal." Eliza said she was hiding in the attic that night. She had come back to collect her pay, thinking no one was home. Then the music began. "Something was wrong. The temperature dropped. I heard them laughing, then screaming, then silence." Through a crack in the floorboards, she saw the family seated in a circle, holding hands. One by one, they slumped forward. No one else entered the house. No one left. Wexley asked her, "Did they ever speak of someone else? Someone not in the family?" Eliza nodded slowly. "Yes, a name, only whispered. They called him the Bound One. Said he was part of the family, but not fully alive." Wexley felt the chill rise in his spine. "This isn't a murder case," he muttered to himself. "It's a ritual, a cycle, and Eliza was never meant to survive it." Chapter 5. Music and Blood. The grand piano at Whitmore Hall had remained untouched for years, or so it seemed. But when Wexley returned to the scene and gently opened the lid, he found a music sheet left behind, slightly burned at the edges. The notes were strange, almost chaotic, yet something about them felt deliberate. Back at his cabin, Wexley placed the music sheet on his desk. He played the melody on an old tape recorder, one key at a time, then reversed the recording. At first, it was nothing but noise, but slowly, a pattern emerged. Then came a voice, faint, masculine, whispering just behind the music. "The first traitor has fallen." Wexley paused the tape. He leaned back in his chair, face unreadable. Someone had hidden a message inside music, not to entertain, but to confess. That night, Wexley began connecting names. One by one, he drew lines between the 7 victims, tracing back their pasts, careers, and secrets. At 2:14 a.m., he stopped writing. His eyes were fixed on a name that appeared in an old newspaper clipping he had pulled from a dusty archive. "Elm Ridge family donates to rebuild orphanage after fire, 1982. The article listed 7 benefactors, all matching the names of the victims. He whispered, "This isn't just about betrayal in the present. It's about something they tried to bury over 40 years ago. And maybe someone had returned from the ashes." Chapter 6. 7 is never a coincidence. The deeper Wexley searched, the clearer it became. The number 7 wasn't just a pattern, it was a signature. At the scene, he walked the rooms again, this time taking detailed notes. 7 family portraits, all tilted at exactly the same angle. 7 crystal wine glasses spilled in the same direction. And on each of the 7 victims, 7 stab wounds, clean, evenly spaced, almost surgical. Wexley muttered, "This wasn't a frenzy, this was a design." Inside the study, hidden behind an old anatomy book, Wexley discovered a small leather-bound journal. It belonged to Evelyn Elmridge, the matriarch of the family, and once a nurse at a burned orphanage in 1982. The pages were filled with short, clinical notes. October 14. John screamed again in his sleep. October 16. They're talking about the basement. I told them to stop. Then the entries became more fragmented. October 20. They found his drawing. I'm afraid. I think I've seen that symbol before. And then the last page had been torn out. Only a scrap of handwriting remained at the bottom. "He has returned. None of us will survive this time." Wexley stood silently, the journal in his gloved hands. 7 victims, 7 wounds, 7 messages. And now, 7 shadows, reaching back from a past they tried to silence. Chapter 7. The Hallway of Memory. There was still one name left on Wexley's list, Isaac Granger, one of the 7 children who survived the 1982 orphanage fire. Wexley had hoped Isaac might remember something, anything. But he was too late. Isaac Granger had been found 1 week before the Whitmore Hall murders, hanging from a rope in his living room. No note, no signs of struggle, just a chair placed neatly below him, like he had accepted his end. The room was clean. Too clean. Wexley noticed a strange detail, a small strip of sheet music left under the piano keys. He carefully lifted the lid. Inside, hidden among the strings, he found a folded piece of paper. Rough, aged, fragile. It was a fragment of a map. Back at his cabin, Wexley laid out the map. It matched the fragments he had collected from other locations, one hidden inside a picture frame, another sewn into a coat lining. When pieced together, the map formed an outline of the northern countryside. One location pulsed like a scar, an abandoned warehouse long forgotten by time. Wexley arrived at dusk. The air was dry and still. Inside the warehouse, the floor was littered with old papers, burned photos, children's shoes. But at the center stood something stranger. A makeshift courtroom, built from rotting wood and rusted barbed wire. 7 wooden chairs faced a raised platform. A large frame hung behind it, empty, as if it once held a name or a face. Wexley walked toward the center and ran his hand across the judge's bench. His fingers touched a carved word, repent. He stood in silence, heart pounding. Someone is not just punishing, they're putting the past on trial. Chapter 8. The Original Sin. It was never just about 7 murders. It was about 1 boy and 7 adults who chose silence. Wexley stood before the old case files in the basement of the Yorkshire Police Archives. Dust covered the boxes. Most were water-damaged, others scorched. The fire in 1982 had destroyed more than buildings. It had wiped out a truth everyone tried to forget. Inside one folder labeled Unresolved Orphanage Incident, he found the report. 7 staff members interviewed, 1 missing child. No formal charges. But what shook him wasn't the lack of evidence. It was what had been deliberately removed. Pages sliced clean, names blacked out, a photo torn in half. 1 note remained, scrawled hastily in pencil. He screamed, he begged, we panicked. The child's name was Nathaniel Cray, age 9. Quiet, clever, and always sketching symbols in the margins of his notebook. A week before the fire, he had told the head nurse that he'd seen something. A late-night meeting in the cellar. 7 adults, a circle of candles, a chant he couldn't understand. That same week, Nathaniel vanished. The official story? He ran away. The truth? He was buried alive in the garden by those who feared what he knew. Wexley whispered to himself, they didn't silence him, they created something worse. When Wexley left the archive, he received a call, another death. Detective Albert Renning, now retired, once in charge of the orphanage fire investigation, found dead in his home. 7 stab wounds, a circle drawn in blood surrounding the body, the same perfume as before, the same silence, and 1 line written in red ink above his fireplace, I remember you. Wexley laid out the evidence back at his cabin, photos, notes, maps, red string. Every victim was connected to the orphanage. Every death mirrored a pattern. In Evelyn Elmridge's journal, 1 line came back to haunt him. We promised to keep it buried. We failed. And now the dead child's name had reappeared in whispers, in the music, in the walls, in the air. But Wexley wasn't sure what haunted him more, the thought that Nathaniel Cray had survived, or that someone else believed he should be avenged. There was 1 final note found near Renning's body, written in the same black ink as the letter that first summoned Wexley to Whitmore Hall. Justice doesn't sleep. It waits. Chapter 9. The Final Silence. Eliza was gone. No goodbye, no message, no sign of struggle. Just an open window, a curtain fluttering in the wind, and a silence that felt planned. Wexley searched her room at the police safe house. Everything was neatly in place, Clothes folded, tea mug rinsed. But when he opened the drawer beneath her bed, he found it, a small, unmarked cassette tape. He brought it back to his cabin and placed it into the tape player. The sound of silence filled the room. Then came her voice, soft, calm, and unsettling. Evelyn Elmridge, Isaac Granger, Albert Renning. She listed all 7 victims, one by one. Then she laughed, not hysterically, but as if remembering something private, something intimate. 7, always 7, but there's still one more name, the one who watched the fire from the outside. Click. The tape ended. For the first time in months, Wexley felt cold, not from the air, but from within. He returned to his wall of evidence. Threads, photos, burned papers, maps. Every victim, every clue, all pointing inward now. Back to 1982. Back to the orphanage. Back to the fire. There had been one child he pulled from the ruins, half-conscious, face covered in soot, unable to speak for days. Wexley never knew the boy's real name. He was placed in care, vanished from the system. Later, someone mentioned he'd changed his identity. Wexley whispered aloud, more to himself than to the shadows, "I didn't save him. I gave him time to become something else." He reviewed every interview, every voice. There was one person who had appeared briefly, helped with information, then disappeared. A consultant attached to the Historical Records Office. Soft-spoken, always wore gloves, refused to be photographed. Wexley found the man's name again. It wasn't real, but the voice, it matched the tape. The final silence wasn't about absence. It was a warning. The storm was not over. The executioner had one name left, and it belonged to the man who once pulled him from fire. Chapter 10. The Dove No Longer Flies. Whitmore Hall stood hollow. No lights, no warmth, just rotting wood, shattered glass, and the lingering echo of something unfinished. It was the first time Wexley returned since the beginning, and it would be the last. He walked the ruined halls alone, each footstep echoing memories. The silence wasn't just around him, it was inside him. In the grand hall, he found the figure waiting, not hiding, not armed, just waiting. A face familiar, yet different. Eyes that burned like someone who had waited a lifetime for this moment. "You don't remember me," the man said, "but I remember the smell of ash. I remember your hand pulling me out. You saved me from the fire, but not from what came after." His voice didn't shake. He wasn't angry. He was complete. "They buried me before I was even born again. 7 of them, 7 shovels, 7 mouths that stayed shut." Wexley didn't speak, because part of him already knew. "You came here for answers," the man said. "So here's mine. You killed me before I had the chance to become anything else." There was no blood, no scream, no chase. Only a conversation and an ending. Wexley didn't call the police. He didn't take a photo. He didn't ask for a name. He simply walked out of the house as dawn broke. In his hand was a letter written in black ink. He had found it placed where the family portrait used to hang, now just an empty hook. It read, "The price of truth is loneliness." Outside, pigeons circled the sky, all but one. His oldest dove, Bishop, lay still in the basket, wings folded. It would not fly again. Neither would Wexley. But somewhere inside him, he felt lighter. The silence was no longer chasing him. He had walked through the fire. And this time, he didn't come out carrying anyone else's sins.